Pictures up, last looks. Welcome, friends, to episode 254 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And this week we take a look back at all the things we covered in 2022. Here we are, end of the year, looking forward to 2023. But before we can do that, we got to look back at this year and talk about all the things we covered and figure out how we feel about them in context, which is something I always love about these episodes, is that I finally get to pause for a minute because we're always on to the next thing when we're doing this, right? This gives us a chance to actually look back and think, like, what have we done? And like, where does this all stack up against each other? And what were our favorites? What was the most surprising? So yeah, I always love these episodes. People seem to like them too, so I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, if this is the first one you're hearing, this is a looser environment. We like to have a drink and kind of look back. And yeah, this retrospective is nice for me to kind of look at the growth that we've had and just like the stories and experiences we've shared with the listeners here.
We are going to, in this episode, talk about our best read and our worst read. So of the things we read this year, what we like the most, what we like the least. We're also going to talk about our most surprising project or most surprising thing. I guess it could be a book or a movie. And that is more subjective, just like what that means to us individually. And then we'll talk about our worst watch and our best watch, aka best adaptation of the year. And we have not shared our responses with each other, so we'll be hearing them from each other for the first time as you are hearing them.
And the statistics, like I do a lot of the statistics for number of episodes and sort of how that breaks down for books and films and everything. And Luke does a lot of the statistics on where we're downloaded and who's listening. So
most downloaded, all that stuff. We'll go over our most downloaded episodes real quick. Yeah. So there's a lot to get through. One thing I do want to propose this year is that if our answer is the same, we can just like talk. We'll both talk about it rather than like draw it out. So if you know our best read is the same, we'll just talk about it and like that kind of stuff. So we'll reveal. But otherwise, we'll go through and make our case for each one. Really curious to hear what your thoughts are on all of these, because I feel like I know what you're going to say for a lot of the time, and then there's always some curveballs in there. Well,
it's funny too, because as I'm going through the list and making my own, I look at it and I'm like, these are the objectively correct answers, right? And then it's funny, like usually we end up like not necessarily on the same page with some of them, but most of the time I somewhat align with how you're feeling. So we'll see if that's similar today.
But before we get into all of that, how was your year, man? You look at 2022. Like in the past, we've talked about living through COVID. We've talked about the elections, and like this year we had a big midterm, and there's been lots of things happening. How did you feel about 2022 in general?
2022 was sort of a return to mostly normalcy, I would say.
New normal, right?
New normal.
It's like normal is not the same as it was.
I mean, on a personal note, it was a good year for growth for me. I think I took a lot of steps professionally, and I feel like I'm better than I was last year.
What does that look like?
Operating cameras more, getting onto bigger productions, and just learning from people who've been doing it for such a long time, and really seeing like my work take a step. And
is this the first year you had that promotion? Because I know you got a big promotion.
Yeah, technically it was. I got promoted to be an associate course director in like March or April of last year. So this year, that was another big step in the progression, I would say, is like, I continue to do a ton of freelance and do the stuff that I'm super passionate about. But another cool thing was in 2020, I got the opportunity to start teaching as well. And it's been really rewarding in a different way than I ever thought I'd be, approaching some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I've been keeping up with it, from afar and cheering you on. Listening to last year's episode, one of my resolutions I talk about was wanting to finish my book. And I didn't really outline what that meant at the time, but like what I meant by that was finish the draft so that I'm ready to query and ready to try and send it to publishers by the end of 2022. And I have done that. You know what I mean? Listening back to that and actually hearing it and going, hey, I actually met that goal. That was rewarding to hear. I had my story come out in Reckoning. That was a lot of fun throughout the year. There's a podcast episode of it now on the Reckoning podcast. Like, that was all cool. So I would say it's been a good year for me. It's been a year that like I knew I had to really buckle down and get the hard work of finishing the book done. And this next year now I'm very excited about, and we just did a whole episode on Patreon where we called it like Query Quest or something like that, which I'm not sure if that's the best name, but that's the name we just went with. And the last second we literally were like, let's just call it that. And anyway, I talk about the process that I'm looking forward to getting into querying agents again, because I would be getting my second literary agent at this point, and what all goes into that. And I just like, I'm very excited about next year, and, you know, nervous because that excitement could crash and burn, or it could be the beginning of something really cool. So I'm pumped. I'm also excited to move on to writing new things, but let's revisit that at the end of the episode. We'll talk about looking ahead to 2023. We'll talk about adaptations that we're looking ahead to. We'll talk about projects that we might do next year. All of that will be at the end.
Before we move on, I did just want to comment on, like, I'm super proud of you for finishing your book, and I'm excited. Like, I can't imagine what, you know, it's sitting here thinking about what Last Looks 2023 looks like. I can't, like, just thinking of your book being published possibly.
No,
and,
it won't be published next year. I can guarantee you that.
Okay. Well,
so
picked
even
up
if
and,
it could be with a publisher.
Sure.
But it's a multi-year process if you do traditional publishing, which is what I'm trying to do. Usually you hear minimum 1 year, if not 2 years, from signing to publication, like actually on the shelf.
Yeah. So in 2023, we could be talking about some new developments with that. But even like myself, like, even with myself, like I got the opportunity to be a director of photography for the first time this year, and like the idea that I might continue to pursue that and get to the point where that's my main title, because currently it's a lot of camera operating and some director of photography. So like if both of us, you know, just seeing the trajectory of our careers continue on it's really interesting. We keep doing these time capsules like this, and
I hope that people find it interesting. You know, it's like
I hope so.
You're listening to our opinion, so I think our connectedness to the industry, which represents our expertise and what we're talking about, I think that's of note. So hopefully people find that cool.
Well, we've said it before, like it's got multiple purposes, right? Like we love interacting with our audience, and we love hearing thoughts of other people who love reading books and watching films, but it does also help us with our own craft. So to see that both of those things sort of symbiotically helping and continue on is really cool.
All right, man. What did we do this year?
Yeah. All right. Episodes and projects. Let's talk about this. So I'm going to start with the total number of episodes that we posted to the main feed on Ink to Film in 2022. And it's 49 episodes currently. When this episode comes out, there will be 50.
It'll be the 50th. Okay.
In 2022. Now, that is including the last looks from 2021, which we posted in the beginning of January.
I forgot we did that. Yeah. Because we got delayed on that one. Does it include From the Vault episodes?
That does include From the Vault, yeah.
Okay, which are also former Patreon exclusives.
Right.
Yeah.
So we had 21 total projects.
Wow. I think that's more. I think last year we had 18. I was looking.
Wow. And I think this has something to do with the fact that we did 11 short stories this year.
Yeah. Most ever by far. Has to be. We did so many short stories this year.
Which is cool. You mentioned in our last episode, in our last looks from 2021, that you wanted to read more short fiction and short stories. So there's that.
You brought it up. I said I was going to read one a week, I think. It was very ambitious. Did not do that. But
you had a book to finish, so it's understandable.
Yeah, I read a bit of short stories more than especially early on. And then we also ended up covering more short stories than ever. So in a sense, I did read more short fiction.
Sure. I kind of already started leading us into this situation, but number of books that we covered.
Okay.
So 21 total projects. That's including TV shows, plays, comics, all kinds of stuff that we covered, TV shows, movies. Of those 21 projects, now this is going to get a little funny too, and I'll explain a lot of this. The number of books that we read, and books being the written material that we tend to see as the source, we read 25 books. Now you're saying like, why is there more books than projects that we covered?
Did you count multiple volumes of Sandman or?
So I didn't count multiple volumes of Sandman because that was one comic run.
Okay.
But we covered, 5 short stories for Cabinet of Curiosity.
Right.
And I counted the podcast for Archive 81, which was something else that we covered.
It's not a read, but I get you.
As the source. So let me break it down. 25 books, 1 novella, which was The Body, 11 short stories, like I said, 5 Cabinet of Curiosity, The Illusionist, After Yang, Spiderhead, Smooth Talk, and Johnny Mnemonic. And then 1 short children's novel, James and the Giant Peach. We talked about Sandman and its single comic run, which was 20 issues.
Yeah.
And then 1 play, Macbeth. And so that's all the stuff we read that weren't full novels. And then we also read 9 full novels.
Okay, cool. Yeah, which I think is the least... I feel like I've read the least novels this year.
I agree.
Of any year, which is kind of a weird feeling. Like, I kind of feel like I was slacking somehow, and I wasn't reading as many books as I should have been. So, we'll see. I'm curious. It's interesting how much my reading life is tied to this now. Like, it's really... This is it. This is what I mostly read, right? Just for the podcast.
Yeah. I made a decision this year to really pursue reading outside of the podcast, and I found it really fun.
Yeah.
It's tough to do.
How many books did you read outside?
Probably 6.
Nice.
Like large fantasy novels. So
That's
that was
awesome, man.
That was cool. Yeah. It was fun because you know what it was we read Wheel of Time and then it was like, hold on, you can't read the second one, so I went and read other fantasy to fill that void, and I just got really sucked into some fantasy worlds this year.
I reread The Haunting of Hill House for another podcast I was on, Why the Book Wins podcast. I went on with Laura and talked about it with her. So that was a book that I reread that doesn't count into this. Haunting of Hill House was my best read of 2021. So I got to read it again in 2022.
That's great, yeah. One of your favorites probably from this year, too. The number of episodes that we posted that covered book material, and there's some overlap here with the film episodes because sometimes we do half of a book and half of a show at the same time as one episode to kind of fill in for shows. There were 23 episodes posted to the main feed that were based around books. So that's, if you're looking through the feed, 23 of them will in some way cover books. And that's with 23 episodes for films as well. Moving into this, 19 films we watched and 4 television shows.
Okay. 4 TV shows again, man. We keep doing TV, and I'm sure we'll do more of it, but it continues to be a little tricky. It's just not as easy.
The reason that it's harder is that we actually, I looked through the feed, and 8 of the episodes posted to the main feed were covering those 4 TV shows. So roughly 2 episodes per show, and honestly sometimes longer than that.
Right.
Depending on how we want to cover it.
But some of those are so rewarding, though, so it's hard to cut them out. Like, they're so good.
There's some of these that we couldn't have missed, and you know, so it's the 4 that we covered for TV shows: Station 11, Archive 81, The Sandman, and Cabinet of Curiosities. Yeah. You talked about From the Vault episodes. I think this is by far the most From the Vault episodes we posted. We posted 8 From the Vault episodes this year.
So we were slacking this year, I guess.
Now, some may see that as slacking, but often if we needed to take From the Vault, it was because either I was on a production or I think you had one where you had something going on.
I'm sure.
With your work. So it's just going to be the nature of the beast. We'd like to still get the content out there for our listeners because, you know, that was an episode that we recorded. And I think a lot of the bonus epides, you know, I like to be able to expose those to the rest of the community.
In theory, it's giving people a taste of what they can get on Patreon. So hopefully it'll entice you to come over to Patreon.
This leads us into guests that we had on this year.
Yeah.
And we had, episodes on the main feed that feature guests, we had 10 episodes.
Wow. Okay. I was thinking we were down this year, but that sounds like that might be more, actually.
Well, we had 7 guests, but we had...
A lot of them came back multiple times. Cool. I think 7 is about the same, actually, if I remember correctly, as last year.
So and just to shout them out, because, you know, we love having people on to give different perspectives. Laura of Why the Book Wins podcast came on for Smooth Talk, and then later came on for the 3rd Hobbit film.
Yeah.
Power to her for that one. Kate Ristow came on for The Hobbit, Desolation of Smaug, which was the second one. Colton and Andrew of Watch Review Repeat came on for The Hobbit, Unexpected Journey, the first one.
Yep.
Rachel K. Jones came on for 2 episodes of Frankenstein, the novel and the film, the 1931 film. Simone Heller came on for 2 episodes of The Last Unicorn, the novel and the film. Michael DeLuca came on for Tragedy of Macbeth, and Patrick Swenson came on for Station 11.
Yeah, what a cool year of guests. You know, that's a collection of people who I know really well and other people who I, you know, just kind of met. That's a fun group, and they were all excellent. So yeah, shout out to all of them for joining us. And special shout out to those who helped us with the slog of the 3 Hobbit films. You know, that was not easy, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so our first real topic here is our most surprising. I like to come out of the gates with this, right? And we can take that to mean whatever we want. It's usually, for me, where I was at with expectations going in and what I ended up getting. So it's a very personal, subjective thing about expectations versus what I got. And I don't know did you approach it the same way? Was something exceeded expectations or what?
I think exceeded expectations is definitely the way that I was going with it, but I wouldn't be opposed to if something totally surprised me in a bad way, having that on my list one year. This time it was a good one. Do you want to go first or you want me to?
All right. I actually have a runner-up and an honorable mention, and then I have my choice for this one. I'll quickly go through the first two, and then we can go back and forth, I guess. So for most surprising, my honorable mention was Emma, the 2020 film, Autumn to Wild, that we covered, because I didn't expect to like that movie as much as I did. I actually had a really good time with it. I thought it was a really visually interesting, just colorful, fun, vibrant movie that I didn't expect to like as much as I did. So that was my honorable mention.
I'm gonna jump in because that was my most surprising. That was my number one.
Your
most
number
surprising.
one.
So,
Okay.
So since we matched. Let's talk about it a little more.
Yeah.
Genre that I'm not super accustomed to, and don't think that I really take to very well.
Right.
This film subverted expectations, and I think made it so that it was more approachable in ways, but also it, like we talked about it gave it this nice edge that I think it was kind of leaning into, in that the sensibilities of the novel, which is older, and then sort of giving it that modern flair of an edge, but keeping it, I don't know, subtle and but like you said, the cinematography is something that stuck with me. Just extremely colorful, and the way that it pops, and the way that all of the characters look amazing, and their costuming, and it looks great. And coming in from very traditional
Jane Austen
novel, and getting an adaptation like this.
It's our second Jane Austen adaptation. So we did the original Pride and Prejudice. So that kind of set the bar, and then also the standard for what a Jane Austen adaptation looks like. And so seeing something like this that went outside that sort of cookie cutter shape was cool to see. Someone really
totally,
flexed something,
because it could have felt just like a BBC historical piece,
or just someone trying to do their best impression of a Pride and Prejudice style adaptation. Yeah.
Sure. And I just want to shout out Autumn to Wild again, because we talked about her background in music videos, and she brought a lot of that to it, and it was super rich, and I just really love that film.
So my runner-up was Archive 81, the TV show. So that was one that was based off of a podcast. Really didn't know what to make of it going in. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, and then in the kind of souring twist is that I don't think the show ended super strong. So that was also kind of a surprise because of how strong I thought it began. So there was just a lot of surprise in that project. And I think back about it and I was all over the place, up and down on that. So that was my runner-up, not my top choice though. So my winner was The Body by Stephen King. And maybe I shouldn't have been surprised that I was going to like it as much as I did. But I really liked this novella, and you comparing it to Stand By Me, the film, I thought that this was going to be one where the movie was just hands down way better, but there was a lot to like in The Body. I had a really good time with that read in particular. Whereas when we watched The Stand, it was a lot more what I was expecting. Whereas the surprise for me in that project was The Body, and ultimately I ended up giving it to that one. But runner up is right there. But yeah, I'll give it to The Body.
Yeah, great story. Super nostalgic, especially if you can identify with those characters.
Mm-hmm.
It hits that note that it's kind of hard to put your finger on, but
coming of age, losing friends, growing up, nostalgia. It's also kind of literary mode for King.
Yeah, and it's the same kind of reason why nowadays something like Stranger Things is popular, right? The demographic that's reading it is kind of reminiscing about some of that stuff, and then the younger generation clicks into it as well and likes it.
I don't want to undersell though, because I feel like sometimes people hear nostalgia fests, I think that's all it is. I felt there was a lot of good heart in this book, and
sure, it
was bittersweet in a lot of ways about growing up, and actually had a lot of interesting things to say about that whole process. It wasn't just what this is what things were like.
Remember this?
It wasn't that.
Remember this?
All right, so let's share a little statistical thing we've done every year since we started this, I believe, is we talk about our top 5 states we were downloaded in. Real quickly, last year, it was number 5, New York, number 4, Texas, number 3, Florida, number 2, California, and number 1, Ohio, which was a big shock. Stormed into our top 5 and took the top spot. Now, this year, 2022, we had some shakeups, we had some jockeying, and we had some surprises. And some familiar names, so don't get me wrong. So let's go from 5 to 1. Top 5 most downloaded. New arrival, Oregon cracked the top 5 at number 5 this year. Which
you say new arrival, but
yeah,
they're back.
They're back, yeah. I'm sure, yeah. Previous years, Oregon's probably been there. I didn't go through all of them, but Oregon, I mean, that's where I live currently. It's where, like, all my friends are now. It's like I know a lot of people here, so I would hope that there would be a decent number of listens in this area. Also, Portland.
I was surprised last year that it wasn't in there.
I was too. But yeah, back in this year, Oregon's back. And speaking of Pacific Northwest, number 4 was Washington State. Also, I feel like has been right around that top 5, but not always in there. And in fact, was not in there last year. So that's already 2 that have come in that were not there. So knocked some stuff out. Love it. Number 3, California. So number 3. So California was number 2 last year, has fallen to number 3 because it swapped positions with our former last year number 3, Florida, which is now this year's number 2. So Florida moved up, number 2. It's where we're from. It's where you live. It's a big state. Lots of people listen there. And yeah, that's our number 2 most downloaded state. Now, number 1, I know I've been saying...
If it's Ohio again...
Ohio has fallen all the way out of the top 5 this year.
Wow.
So who do you think replaced him? Who's number 1?
Oh, man. New York.
Good guess. New York also fell out of the top 5. This year, our number 1, Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, and in fact, I think Dallas-Fort Worth, when I looked, like I clicked in, looked in even closer, like that was the market that was our top market in the country.
It's all those transplants. Everybody's going to Texas, I heard, right?
I don't know. Dallas-Fort Worth area. Apparently, people like Ink to film there. So shout out to everybody in Texas. You guys are awesome. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
I heard there's a lot of people there, too.
Yeah, that's a good probably reason why. Okay, so that's maybe a little self-indulgent, but I think it's fun, especially for us to look back on. Are you ready to share worst read? I think let's have you go first this time since I went first last time, and then if you say the same thing, I'll just chime in.
Yeah, and it might be because... recency bias and everything, but I'm going to go with 58 Minutes, which we just covered.
By Walter Wager. That was mine as well. Yep 58 Minutes.
Yeah. Because none of the other ones stood out to me as a worse read. Like, this wasn't aggressively bad. It wasn't really my cup of tea, like I said in our episode about it. But the rest of the stuff that we covered, I was like, wow, these are all just incredibly good.
So if you don't know, this is the basis for Die Hard 2. The sort of the bones of the plot was stolen, aka adapted from this novel and turned into Die Hard 2. And I agree. I did not like the main character. I think I called him like aggressively boring or the most boring protagonist ever, something like that. I was not very complimentary.
I mean, there's some questionable things that are in there that we don't agree with morally.
Yeah, it hasn't aged well in many ways. Now, it was a fast-paced thriller with lots of action, so there are things to like about it. I just like I had kind of turned against it at a certain point while reading it, and it's just hard to really enjoy something once you feel that way. And that was my worst read. And like you said, I didn't even do any runners up because I didn't feel like it was particularly close. I think that was by far the worst read. But we don't like talking about bad stuff very much. We will do it when it's deserved, and I think it was deserved here. Sorry, Walter Wager, although I think he has passed on. But yeah, that book, not very good.
Yeah, yippee-ki-yay, 58 Minutes.
Okay. But let's palate cleanse and move immediately into one of my absolute favorite topics, and that's the best read of the year. As the resident book guy, I guess, this is where I'm at. I have an honorable mention, I have a runner-up, and I have a winner. How do you want to go about this one, James?
I have a runner-up and a couple of like sort of honorable mentions.
Yeah, I would love for you to give at least one honorable mention of the books you read outside the pod. Just let me know which one of those was your favorite.
Okay, sure. Honorable mention outside the pod. I loved. So I've been reading through some Sanderson's material, and he's well known. So you may have heard of him. He's a fantasy author.
Yeah.
And
Brandon Sanderson.
He has the Stormlight Archive, and I dove into that this year. And the first one, The Way of Kings, really, really gripped me and brought me into a fantasy world in a way that it's very unique in a way that I hadn't read, at least in a very long time. So that's one that I'll talk about, and then really the third one was where I was like, okay, this author is doing something different that not a lot of people are doing.
Is that Oathbringer?
Oathbringer. Yeah, Oathbringer.
I haven't read that one. I've only read the first two.
Again, I don't have the time to read a ton of fantasy, so I'm not like an expert on it.
Yeah.
But in terms of the things that I've consumed, I felt like it's really cool to see somebody doing this in the space. And he is kind of a genre swallowing name right now.
Yeah.
So there's that to be said as well. Like, read other people besides Sanderson, but I've enjoyed my time in his story so far.
Cool. All right. So how about back to the pod? What was your, do you have an honorable mention or a runner-up you want to start with?
So my honorable mention is, like, I'm going to state this as a joke, but I don't mean for it to be, because, like, are we even allowed to not say that Macbeth and Frankenstein were the best reads of the year?
No, that's a good point. That's a really solid point. And in fact, yeah, let's just go ahead and say those are also my honorable mentions.
Yeah.
Macbeth.
I mean, like, to not state those two, I feel like would be going against all literary criticism at this point.
That's true. I mean, they're fantastic, but they're like, it's like saying the Mona Lisa is a great painting. It's like, okay, yeah,
right.
It's, widely considered the like greatest of all time. So like, why? It's not interesting to talk about that much. So unfortunately, that wasn't in my list. But like, when you say that, you're totally right. Like, they should be said. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get that out of the way.
Their influence can't be understated.
Okay.
So those are my sort of honorable mentions. Do you want to give some of yours?
Yeah, I'm going to give my runner-up. So, honorable mention. So my honorable mention was The Autopsy by Michael Shea, which was my favorite of the Cabinet of Curiosities stories. It was a dark, sort of almost cosmic horror, involved sci-fi, without spoiling it too much, body horror. There's a lot of things about it that is right up my alley, and I thought it was really well executed. Again, my favorite of any of the stories we read for that anthology series. And it was also surprising. It could have been on my surprising list. Really cool. So, yeah, I will give The Autopsy by Michael Shea at least an honorable mention. And then let's move into the runner-up, I think. Runner-up for me, and this was tough, but I decided to go with this because in the episode itself, I think I said, like, if I had read this when I was a teenager, it would have become my entire fucking world. And I still feel that way, and that's the Sandman. Those comics were so good. I loved them, and I will say, I really, this is kind of issues 1 through 16. I felt like the 4 that came after were a little more hit or miss for me, but overall, just such a great run. I'm really excited to see a season 2 of the Sandman and read some more of these comics, because I'm loving them, man.
Yeah, which we haven't even stated on the podcast. Like, we back when Sandman was finishing up, we were hopeful that it would continue, but it's confirmed now that it will be coming back for season 2.
So was that one of yours?
This was my runner-up.
Okay, runner-up. Both of our runner-ups. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I love that we were able to represent, first of all, the visual medium of comics. Like, I feel that that's like, and at this point it's pretty mainstream, but
Sure.
for a long time it wasn't, and I love this sort of storytelling. I love the way that it's meshing both of our preferred mediums.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're getting the visual medium mixed with the narrative, and you're getting an author like Neil Gaiman coming in and telling the story about some incredible, super cool dream god, and I had so much fun with it, and I can't wait to read more.
It was a piece falling into place for me for like understanding who Neil Gaiman is in the genre as a figure. It's like, oh, this is his thing. It's like, it really comes back to Sandman, and he established so many hallmarks of what makes his fiction cool and interesting. And it's incredibly well written, incredibly well drawn. I'm still fairly new to comics, I guess, but like at some point I probably have to stop saying that, but like, I still haven't read that many, and just to have my mind blown by what was possible, and reading that, even though it was done, way back when, so cool, so fun. So big shout out to that. But I felt like I needed to have a novel, and really that might have been the deciding factor, is that I wanted, because I feel like a comic is, yeah, you are reading a comic, but you're also kind of like just looking at a comic because you're looking at art. So I wanted to give it to a pure read and give it to a novel. And for me, got to go all the way back to the beginning of the year. Station 11, Emily St. John Mandel was my read of the year. I said it in the episode. This is going to be a really hard one to dethrone. This might be my read of the year. And it held out. It held out against many oncomers and many contenders. And
it held out against Macbeth and Frankenstein.
For me, I'm not saying it's the better book, but it's the one I enjoyed more, and I will stand by that, because it's modern. It's the kind of thing I really like. I thought it's beautiful and poignant and sad, and unlike The Stand, which did not age super well post-COVID, I think Station 11 aged great. Like, I think it really captured something.
It's not even necessarily about the pandemic itself. It's about the fallout of it, and like the emotional trauma. And this is my best read of the year as well, Station 11.
Okay, awesome. So we're in agreement.
Station 11 just hit me so squarely because we were in sort of a borderline post-pandemic world. And just the way that, like, I don't know if it's super morbid, but like it could have been worse in ways. And like just how we were dealing with things that even if it had been far, far worse, we still would have been dealing with. And the way that that was relatable in a way. And like you said, extremely like emotionally driven. And the narrative really pulled me in. And the way that we had these different, they're like these different storylines that all come together at some point. And I mean, we talked about in the show Macbeth and I think King Lear specifically was highly important, and just having those two things and Shakespeare sort of thread in, and the idea of storytelling in a post-pandemic world, and how like storytelling is still important even when survival is the only thing on your mind is really powerful to me as an artist.
Yeah. Survival is not sufficient is the line from the book, and you're totally right. I think, and that's why I think it aged better, because the book is about how surviving the apocalypse gives us perspective on our lives from before the apocalypse. And that was intercutting between those two. I felt like there was always this effect of like the thing we're reading post-apocalypse influencing what we're reading pre-apocalypse, and like casting it in a new light and like teaching us lessons about our lives and our modern lives. And I love all of that. I think it aged really well. Yes, very different situation because that was obviously way worse in the book. But like, I think that's still very applicable to today, because post 2020 and pre 2020 is a pivot point in world history that are for the rest of our lives. We're going to look back on and talk about life before 2020, the pandemic, and life after. It just is, and it was a huge event that affected everybody. That's really cool that we came down on the same one. Last year we did not. So last year, your winner for best read was Slaughterhouse-Five, Kurt Vonnegut, which
stand by that.
One of my favorite books. So like, I'm not going to knock you there. Mine was The Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson, which was like a new find for me. I'd never read a Shirley Jackson novel before. Absolutely loved it. My runner-up was Slaughterhouse-Five. Your runner-up last year was Dune, by the way, which, yeah, of course, that's a great book too. Sure. So totally with you there.
We got to cover Mary Shelley this year with Frankenstein, and the way that like the horror, women of horror, and the way that has sort of, Haunting of Hill House was a progression of that from Mary Shelley, and it kind of puts into perspective, like reading Frankenstein and thinking back now to Haunting of Hill House, and just the way it all comes together. The genre sort of develops out of Frankenstein. It's really cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so that was our best read. I'm sad, but we got to move on. Let's talk about the top 5 countries we were downloaded in. And this is going to be a quick one because guess what? Exactly the same. 5-1. Belgium, Germany, Canada, Australia, UK. Same order, same countries.
Wow.
Yeah, how about that? Consistent.
They're just consistent. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, not as exciting, I guess, to talk about because it's the same, but like shout out to all of those countries.
Yeah.
I'm sure we once again, we want to go to these countries. I'd love to visit.
Sure. Yeah. Let's bring that joke back.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sure I said it last year, but just the perspective changing realization that people all around the world are listening to us is it really humbles you when you think about that. And I really appreciate that people are like as interested as we are in these subjects.
Taking time out of their day to listen to us talk about books and movies, and like caring, what we say and finding it interesting. So that is really humbling, and definitely thank you all. Not only outside the country, but those 5 states we just talked about, and other states, everybody everywhere,
all at once.
But yeah, now we got to get we got to get negative again. We're gonna go worst watch. And do you want to lead off on this one, or do you want me to?
Sure, I have a runner-up. I thought I wouldn't have a runner-up, but
I have a runner-up too.
Okay, I'm sure they're the same.
Maybe.
Okay, so my runner-up is Spiderhead, which was a Netflix film that we watched.
Not the same. Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'll talk about Spiderhead. So this felt like the most bizarre attempt to create what was in the source material. It felt like a vehicle for Hemsworth, and I like Hemsworth a lot. I think he's got good comedic chops. He was an interesting villain, I guess, but it felt like it didn't necessarily understand the source material in ways, and it sort of devolves into this really weird thing that it feels like a fever dream.
You got lazy at the end, and it wanted to end it in a way that was like a big Hollywood ending instead of the weird ending that the story had, and it just didn't translate well. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's not a good movie. I'm totally with you on that one. It was not my choice. So I kind of had two runners up, but really it's one. But like I'll mention them both. So Giant Mnemonic, not a good movie. But it was fun. Like I remember laughing my ass off in that episode with you. And so like that made it to where that wasn't the winner for me because I just had so much fun talking about it, even though not a good movie. And then my other runner-up is specifically the Graveyard Rats episode from Cabinet of Curiosities, which I think was the worst. Although you might argue that one of those the Lovecraft one, Dreams in the Witch House, I also really didn't like. But I think if I had to pick, Graveyard Rats is probably it.
So that sounds like it's soured even more for you as time has gone on.
There is some fun like campiness to it, but like ultimately, like thinking back about it, it's just not a very good episode. And I know I've talked to a lot of people who bounced off of the show basically due to that episode.
Yeah.
Which is a
weird choice. I mean, like that wasn't the first episode. The first one was the Lot 39 or whatever it was. Yeah. But it was a weird choice to have both of those back to back as like you start with something really strong. I would start with the strongest episode, arguably.
Yeah, which we talked about. There are some bangers later on in that. Yeah. We covered on Patreon some that weren't adapted from short stories that were really good. There were some that we really, really liked. Like, yeah, you start. I think there are 4 episodes, which I said before. I think The Autopsy, The Outside. And then from the ones we watched later, it was The Murmuring and The Viewing.
The Viewing.
Yeah, The Viewing. Those are the 4. You watch those 4 episodes. The other ones are optional. But those 4 are really, really good.
I totally agree. Yeah, you want me to tell you my least favorite film of the year?
Let me give you mine first. Since you're the film guy, you can hit me with yours. So I have a feeling this one might be the same. The Battle of Five Armies. The Hobbit. Is that the same?
Yeah, same. Okay. Same for me, yeah.
So we can just talk about it. I hate that movie. It's really bad.
Yeah.
It's worse than I remembered. It was an absolute slog to watch.
Right.
Brutal.
Can we shout out Laura of Why the Book Wins again for coming on? And it's not her preferred genre. Yeah. She was a really good sport about it and found things to talk about. So shout out to her again for coming on and talking that film with us. It's just, again, we talked last year about expectations, right? The expectations of what a Hobbit film or unfortunately trilogy could be. This doesn't come close. And we talked, I gave and I continue to give Peter Jackson, a lot of grace because it's an insurmountable task that he had. Like he had to contend with giant corporations and all these other things going on, but it's kind of inexcusable at the end of the day because you just walk in that situation.
You can't take away what he did with Lord of the Rings, but at the same time, you can't excuse what happened with The Hobbit. So
yeah, and I know he was trying to do I think it could have been worse based on once Del Toro left? Do I think it could have been worse from what Jackson delivered? Yes, but also he could have decided to be like, okay, well, things aren't going well, let's simplify. And instead he expanded.
Yeah. He just it felt like he really just gave in to all the worst influences and people asking for things and he just let it go and released his creative control, it seems like to me, and just welcomed all the bullshit in.
We also watched the extended cut, which we don't recommend.
Don't recommend it. Don't do it.
But we did it.
We did it. Fun episode. If you like hearing me rant, I definitely rant a lot in that episode.
And again, Peter Jackson's hugely influential to me with the Lord of the Rings films, and then I continue to love the stuff that he's doing with the Beatles doc that he did, and then the World War I documentary. Like he's a great filmmaker, and he's going to continue to make some really poignant, awesome stuff. But it's going to be his low point, honestly.
Has to be. All right, man. So I'm excited to get to our main event, which is our best watch and adaptation. But before we do, I'd like to go over our top 10 most downloaded episodes in 2022. We like to share these because we feel like it is a chance for people to maybe find out if there's something they missed from this year that's really hot and that people are really liking. We like to kind of view it that way. So without further ado, from 10 to 1, most downloaded episodes of 2022, we had the intersection of science fiction and horror, the 2001 A Space Odyssey film watch episode. Episode number 228 was our 10th most downloaded episode. I guess let's not dive into it too much, but especially for the 10 to 6. Very fun episode, though. Look back on that one fondly.
Definitely.
Number 9, The Third Murderer, our Tragedy of Macbeth film episode featuring Michael DeLuca. So great guest episode number 218, I should say. 9th most downloaded. A lot of fun, cool movie. But we'll move on. Number 8, Hack Your Own Brain, Johnny Mnemonic, which we just talked about a little bit ago. Episode number 221, our 8th most downloaded episode.
That's surprising, honestly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm curious. So the other two you kind of expected, but this one...
I would say that they're films that people, there's a lot to dig into with them.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, moving up. Number 7, Getting Into the Spirit, our Station 11 2021 TV series, episodes 6 through 10, featuring Patrick Swinson, guest episode 216. That is our Station 11, finishing out the show and making our judgment on which was better, show or book.
I loved having Patrick Swinson on, too, because he had that background in some Shakespearean literature, right?
He's an English teacher, so he teaches Shakespeare, and he loves Emily St. John Mandel, a massive fan of the book series and the author, so really cool. Great person to have on.
Yeah. Huge shout out to both of our guests so far. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, number 6, Break a Few Eggs, the Emma 2020 film. So that was one that we've already talked about as being a surprise. We had a lot of fun with it, and it was our 6th most downloaded episode. Okay, now we're into our top 5. So most downloaded, number 5, An Apocalyptic Perspective, Station 11, the novel. So our best read of the year, our first episode of the year. So honestly, it has the best chance at being the most downloaded, but it delivered. It's in the top 5. Great book, a lot of fun to talk about, and our 5th most downloaded of the year.
That's great.
All right, so number 4 is by far the most recent on the list, and that is Cosmic Horror is Hard to Adapt, our Cabinet of Curiosities, episodes 5 and 6. That is our Lovecraft episodes.
Wow.
Where we talk about those too.
You know what? Lovecraft fans are pretty passionate bunch, so I'm sure they wanted to hear our thoughts on that.
Yeah, and that one in particular I think had a lot of traction on YouTube. Which helped a little bit by comparison. So yeah, that ended up being our 4th most downloaded episode of the year, and it's one where we kind of shit on those 2 episodes. I mean, we were mixed on Pickman's model, but it definitely Dreams in the Witch House we both didn't like, so kind of a negative episode, but I always feel bad, but like people must have liked it, or I hope they did.
Yeah, I wonder if that means that some people were finding some topics that they agreed with in the episode.
Share it with a friend. Like, I didn't really love that, and like I was having trouble articulating why, but like listening to these guys, like they talk about why. That would be cool.
I would like to think that, at least, that's nice.
All right, so top 3, number 3, Shakespeare's nastiest play, Macbeth, which was episode 217. So our first time ever covering Shakespeare, and our episode we did, no guest, just me and you, talking about the play, was our 3rd most downloaded of the year.
To have the opportunity to get to dig into it in the way that we do for the podcast was so fun, and I'm glad people are responding to it. And I think there's some mystique that sort of travels around some of Shakespeare's work, and maybe some people find it intimidating, but the fact that we were able to cover it and maybe bring it to some people and I don't know, I hope talk about it in an approachable way. I mean, we both played God of War recently. You sent me a text about how you found a Macbeth reference in God of War, and like that's so cool that we have that puzzle piece filled in now.
For those of you who've played, it's Mimir, the severed head. At some point he like tells a story, and it's the story of Macbeth. They don't say Macbeth, but it is.
They say, what do they say? The Thane,
the Scottish. I don't even think they say Scottish, but yeah, they're talking about a Thane and a king, and they give the plot outline essentially of Macbeth, and then I think it's the boy says like you should write that down or something like that.
That's good.
Okay, number 2. And this one was kind of a surprise for me. I just didn't think this project would have as much pull as it ended up having. That was The Devil at Your Door, Smooth Talk.
Wow.
Number 2 most downloaded. So that one also featured Laura of Why the Book Wins. And it was so much fun to talk about that movie and to dive into that story. What a cool one. And it's Joyce Carol Oates, who is kind of a controversial figure, I guess, at least if you follow her on Twitter. But a big name in literary, the literary world. Definitely a cool one, and yeah, I'm excited to see it get as much play as it did.
That's great. Yeah, I think back to that one, and there's some weird stuff going on in the story, and I know it was by design, but what a wild project that was. And yeah, shout out to Laura for coming on and helping us through that one. That was like, I just remember that character was so dark.
Yeah.
Like,
based off a real serial killer.
kind of tough to read at times. Yeah,
uncomfortable
or
story.
to watch as well.
Really excellently crafted short story. Where are you going? Where have you been? It's a classic. So there was a lot to dig into there. Okay, and that's all that remains is our number one most downloaded episode. Any guesses?
I don't even know. Maybe one of the Station 11, just because of the popularity of it.
You got it, man. It's the one Station 11 episode we haven't talked about yet, and that is the beginning of the TV series, episodes 1 through 5, Hatchet to the Loop. We first start talking about the series, and what a good one that one was, because we really enjoyed that series, and had a lot of fun talking about it, and yeah, very early on in the year, again, so that gives it a good chance to build steam over time. And it ended up being our most downloaded episode of the year. Yeah.
I mean, it means it has to perform too, though. And like, I think rightfully so. If anything's to get a ton of views, I would hope that, or a ton of downloads, I would hope that it was Station 11, just because that's a book and a project in general that I feel like I just want to expose people to. That's one of those ones.
It does feel like a show that didn't get enough hype, right? Like, didn't get enough play.
And I'm scared that with HBO sort of pulling stuff, that at some point they may pull Station 11 or something.
Yeah,
that would be
check
awful.
it out if you haven't got a chance. Really good. And like, I think a lot of people might be a little hesitant to go into it because of COVID, and they're like, I don't want to have to relive pandemic stuff.
Yeah, it's not really that.
But it's so worth it, and it's so good, actually. It actually really works. In a post-COVID world, so I recommend that episode. All right, here we go. Our main event, the thing that we build to every year, and that is our best watch, which is also the best adaptation. We were talking before we started recording. We were like, is it the best movie we watched, or is it the best adaptation? And the answer
of this material,
the answer is like, I don't know, and neither do you. It's also like it's hard for me to differentiate those two things because they do run together so much, the way we cover stuff. So ultimately kind of one and the same. Anyway, yeah, I didn't really know, but I have not only my winner and a runner-up, I also have an honorable mention and an honorable mention from outside the podcast.
Oh, wow. Okay. I have an honorable mention, and since there's some synergy going on, I'll mention it. And don't take this as a slight in any way, but it's Station 11.
Okay, cool. No,
that's a best watch. I had such a good time with that series. It was the best, one of the best shows I watched this year. I'm trying to rack my brain right now and see if it's the best, but it was definitely the best we've watched for the podcast. And the performances that were there and the ways that it made me feel along the way, it was so like emotional. It really, really captured a lot of what I loved about the novel. In different ways too, and the way that it really, like I said, centered on that idea of storytelling, maybe more than the story itself, but I think there was some there in the original source material. Just the way that seeing performers on stage doing Shakespeare, and how that will forever be this really moving experience, and seeing it, whether no matter what happens, there will be people out there to tell stories, and you know, there's a legacy to that, I think. And it just, I love the way that the show made me feel, and the way that it brought together a lot of the storylines, and I just had a great time with it.
Also an honorable mention of mine, so I'll go ahead and say it. Station 11, it was the best show we covered of the year. It's my top show. It didn't quite win for best thing we watched, but great show. I liked a lot of smart adaptation choices that were made. I do remember at the end not loving everything they did. There was like certain changes I wasn't as on board with. So there was just enough there to keep me back from like saying like, this was my watch of the year. It was perfect. You know, it wasn't quite that, but shout out to Patrick Somerville, who was the showrunner, did a great job. Fully deserves honorable mention. I'm also going to give my honorable mention from outside the pod. And that's going to be the House of the Dragon.
Nice.
Because I have read Fire and Blood. I read it years ago. I don't remember it super well, so it is technically an adaptation. So I felt like it was within the scope of talking about it.
That's one of the books I read outside of the podcast this year.
Nice.
Actually, that's funny.
Yeah, so I'm giving it an honorable mention because that actually might be my favorite thing I watched this year. I loved House of the Dragon. I think Game of Thrones is back with this show.
Sort of recaptured a lot of the magic.
Yeah,
right?
And honestly, like, this show could be better, which is a wild thing to say. But, like, it was that good. It's got a lot of potential, and maybe it won't ever hit, like, the absolute highest of highs that Game of Thrones hit, but, like, it has the chance to. It's that good.
Well, and if it can promise that it'll be more consistent because it has a beginning, middle, and end, and we know where we're going, and
there was some tricky stuff to get through in this first season with a lot of time jumps and things like that. And I've heard that this next season's not going to have any of that. So I'm really excited for season 2.
I'm excited for what they can explore with Fire and Blood too, like stuff before this series as well, and there's a lot there that I think is ready. Like I said, because we have beginning, middle, and ends for a lot of these stories, I'm not scared of what they might deliver on because it seems like it's in good hands right now.
Yeah, and the double Ds are no longer connected to it, so that's the other great thing to hear about that.
Yeah, big bonus.
But again, outside of the scope of the pod, so let's move on. I have a runner-up. I guess if this is one of your two, go ahead and hit me with it. But my runner-up is The Tragedy of Macbeth, directed by Joel Cohen, I believe. It's my runner-up. Best adaptation. I loved this thing. Black and white and super pretentious and
super stylized.
Very stylized and like film bro-y, and it's also it's Shakespeare, which like I don't know. I'm not a Shakespeare guy. So like let me put that out there. Like I'm not someone who loves all these Shakespeare adaptations. I'm always seeing the new ones. No, not at all for me, honestly. So the fact that this one appealed to me and was as good as it was and had such great performances and iconic moments, I just was really taken with it. And this was the first time I've ever watched a Shakespeare adaptation and thought like, I really get the appeal of modern Shakespeare retellings and adaptations and like why people still do it. And why it's worthwhile to do, because it was really good.
So this is my top of the year, best watch of the year. Yeah. This is my best watch of the year. And like, you said all the things, the pretentious things that I am, but it captures, like you said, it captures some of the magic. And I am always very skeptical of seeing anyone try to give their version of something that's this classic. And Joel Cohen gave it like in an incredibly visual way. The use of like you said, it's black and white. So the use of contrast and the use of endless stages, basically, a lot of it's filmed on a stage during COVID, which is a huge task to overcome. And the performances are, it's Frances McDormand.
Yeah.
It's
Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington. Yeah. It's some of the greatest actors in the world. And seeing the way that they capture it and, like you said, brought to life something that I read and felt like I understood really well. Yeah. But seeing their interpretation of it.
I will say the way we covered it, that's the fucking way now, man. If we're going to do more Shakespeare, like read the play, cover the play, then go see the thing because it's like in your mind, it's fresh. You know the moments that you're looking for, the iconic.
You can really tell the artist's intentions, whether it's the director or the actor on screen and what they're trying to capture. And Frances McDormand killed this movie.
Lady Macbeth in this. Yeah,
Lady Macbeth. She was so good in this movie, and like so was everyone else. Like I forget the name of the actor now, but the actor that played the witches, fates or whatever.
That was so cool.
So good and so cool the way that like visually and they use cinematography to sell that, and I just it blows me away. And the texture of the film, the way that it's like sort of always got some haze to it, and like it feels like it's a stage production at the same time as being like this really high level film production. It blows me away. It was such a cool movie.
Yeah, highly recommend our episode on it with Michael DeLuca too. It was really fun breaking it down with him.
Yeah,
because I think he was skeptical going in because he feels like the kind of guy who's seen a lot of Shakespeare adaptations and is like ready to not like them. But like, man, he seemed like he really liked this one too. I had a lot of fun with it. It was cool.
So I want to give you my runner-up because that was my favorite. My runner-up, and I have a feeling it may be your favorite.
Yeah.
We'll see. So my runner-up is going to be After Yang.
No.
Okay, great. So we get a chance to talk about After Yang.
Let's talk about After Yang.
This movie almost was my most surprising, but I was going to give it as runner-up as the best watch because it was a really cool concept in the short story. The way that we read it, and I came out of nowhere. You told me about it. I had no idea that even the movie had come out. And we go, and it's got these great performances. It's this really interesting look at AI and what the future may hold for us and the way that we may attach to what we currently don't see as living beings and where we sort of draw that line. And it's kind of picking up where something like a Blade Runner leaves off, but Blade Runner is that action.
Yeah, this was an
right?
action.
and this is AI with like the home.
Yeah. It's welcoming AI into your family and what kind of effect, like your children, and like what kind of effect that can have.
Well, and my comparison to Blade Runner is just like what does it mean to be alive, and like how that sort of goes into this in a much more human way, and like
slow burn though, like a lot of vignettes and like Really interesting filmmaking, but the pacing is very slow, and that I think is what ultimately kept it out of my like top choice. Like I really liked this movie, but I struggle to recommend it to people because I really have to get a vibe for a person and like know how much patience they have. Because if you don't have a lot of patience when in your movie watching, you're not going to be able to get into this thing.
Yeah. And it's just so visually interesting too. Like you get this futuristic look, but it's got this like really welcoming, warm look to a lot of it. And it just, again, that was one that really stuck with me. And the Colin Farrell performance is incredible. The Yang, I forget the actor's name right now, but his performance as Yang was really endearing. And you are like, oh, this is a member of my family, and to lose them would be, once they've ingrained with my children and with my life in this way, what's the difference at that point?
It's that sad beauty too. Like Station 11 has a good bit of that, but like I do love it when something is so beautiful it hurts, and it's also just really sad, but also uplifting. Like you have to like pair it with the right emotions, otherwise really sad is just becomes overwhelming. And this is not that either.
I think it's the human spirit too. It turns into like, what does it mean to be alive, and why?
Now, there was also a lot of questions about what it means to be Asian, and like especially Asian in America. And there's a lot of like layered metaphors going on here that was really cool to touch on, especially in the film, to see that touched on. Cool, man. That's interesting. That's your best adaptation of the year. I mean, I'm not going to knock it. Like, I see.
That's the runner-up. That's my runner-up.
That's right. That was your runner-up because Station 11 was your best.
Tragedy of Macbeth was my best.
All right. You know what? I'm all over the place. Station 11 was an honorable mention. Tragedy of Macbeth, number 1. Okay, so for me, honorable mention, Station 11. Runner-up, Tragedy of Macbeth. Best of the year, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
So I have in quotes on my list, best watch. Am I even allowed to not say 2001: A Space Odyssey?
As I was thinking about it, I was like, you probably feel the same way about this movie that like we talked about with Frankenstein and Macbeth in the like best read area.
How can I not have that as the top, like as influence?
The reason it was for me is this was my first time ever seeing this movie. I'd always heard about it, and I was like, it had been built up so much that I felt like it was going to be a letdown. There's no way. And I absolutely love this movie. The visuals stand up to today. Like there's so much drama, the Hal interaction, right, is so good. The mind-bending just wildness that happens at the end of the film, the bold decisions that were made by Stanley Kubrick, the unbelievable filmmaking, it's the stuff of legend. And I'm thinking about that, about that coverage and how much fun I had talking about it with you. I think that really helps me when it becomes like a best of, choice. It always has to be like a really good episode too. And I thought that was a really good one. So yeah, that one's the one for me, man. Like it was so good. I was so happy to like come away from it and be like, I actually did really love that movie. I know a lot of people say it's their favorite movie, but like I thought I was going to be a letdown. It was not. I loved it.
There's a reason why will probably forever be, because of the time period that it came out, one of the greatest films of all time, and it'll always make every list.
Historically amazing. Like the idea that the stuff he was putting on film before we had even been to the moon yet is incredible.
He obviously is a visionary, but also the attention to detail, the effort that's put into it, the care that's put into it. Clearly a controversial figure in some people's eyes, but you can't deny just the absolute meticulous level of detail that he puts into everything, and the way that he was pushing forward the medium in ways that current filmmakers are trying to do as well. But all of the filmmakers that today that are working will point to 2001: A Space Odyssey as a watershed moment in filmmaking. Period.
Well, and all the sci-fi films we love and I love, like a lot of my favorite, like they owe so much to this movie. It is like the modern blueprint for all of sci-fi that came after.
Yep,
it's incredible. And yeah, I think an appropriate one, at least for me, to be my best. I get that it's like kind of like a eye-rolly pick because it is the one that everybody's going to be like, of course. But for me, again, first time ever watching it. So that's why I felt like I had to give it to it this year.
I don't blame you, man. It's one of those that if it comes to town and there's like a road show or a projection or something, like I'm going to go see it in film.
That's one of the times where I do wish we lived in the same city so that we could go do stuff like that. Because like the problem is I don't know a lot of people here who would be like down for that kind of shit. But I'd love to do that too. That's cool. All right, man. So what we have left to do here at the end of the episode is to look forward to 2023. And one of the ways we like to do that is to talk about some upcoming adaptations that we're excited about. And then also just talk about some stuff that we like kind of know we want to cover. and that we think we might cover either in the coming year or at least soon, because it doesn't always end up being true. But yeah, where do you want to start? You just want to like start naming some stuff?
Sure, yeah. I am going to reference 2021's Last Looks episode where we mentioned this mysterious stop-motion animated Guillermo del Toro film called Pinocchio. And it has since come out, and we haven't covered it for the podcast yet. And I almost want to just say that we're going to cover it in the beginning of the year. We don't know for sure yet.
I don't think it'll be our first project, because I'm going to talk to you. I want to, I guess this is a good time to bring it up. And I wanted to wait until the episode to talk to you about it, but I want to start the year with an absolute banger. And I want to start the year with something iconic. And I've come up with a list of projects. I have 4 options. And I think any one of these 4 would be a great way to start the year off. So do you want to get to that now? Do you want to talk about that now?
Sure, yeah, let's do it. I mean, I think it's fitting.
So what I might do, honestly, is put this up as a poll. Not sure where yet. Maybe Twitter? Maybe Facebook?
Or both.
Twitter's falling apart, so
sure.
maybe multiple locations, and I'll add it together. Anyway, we're gonna do a poll. Here are the 4 options, unless James decides he doesn't like it. But I think any of these would be big, right? Okay. The Wizard of Oz. This is one we've talked about a long time. Where you're like, oh, there's so much research that's gonna go into that. It's such a big,
I mean, I studied that in college, so there's so much with that film. Talk about influential,
right? And like to start the year off with The Wizard of Oz, I think it'd be pretty cool. And it's also one that like we would have time to do the proper research. Now another one here, and this one's maybe the most outside the norm here, but 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That because I'm trying to shop my undersea novel for one. But also because it is a Jules Verne project, which he's not an author we have talked about, who is an absolutely iconic figure in science fiction.
Yeah, I read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea when I was a kid.
There you go. So another cool one, I think is a 1954 adaptation I was looking at, is the most well-known one. So that's probably the one.
I don't know that I've ever seen an adaptation of it, though. So there's that.
Yeah, I think it's the most well-known one. It's it's a big one. And then there's the film adaptation, Charlie Kaufman. We've been talking about covering this thing since the beginning of the podcast because it's so perfect, and it's all about the nature of adaptations and all this stuff. And we've been like, what do we even do to cover this? I don't even know. But I'm like, that would be a cool way to start the year. Charlie Kaufman, something just
it feels
wild.
Like one where we can't approach it in the normal sense of the podcast.
You almost can't, but maybe
we have to play with it.
Maybe you find a way.
That's adaptation, by the way. I feel like the word adaptation went flying by. Well, the film is literally called Adaptation. It's based on something else, right?
The Orchid Thief or something like that?
I think so, yeah.
But it's in the movie because in the movie he's trying to make an adaptation for the book.
Right. So it's very meta in terms of like
the most
what we're doing
ever.
And speaking about here.
Yeah, and it would be super fun to talk about. And then the other one is Rashomon. Which,
boy.
Right? One of your favorite directors of all time, which I would love to talk about with you. And then also like there's this technique employed in this film that's famous for where it tells things from multiple perspectives, like the same event. And I realized that's something that I like to do and that I've done in my novel. And I really want to talk about I really want to like watch this movie. I've never seen it. And I want to study it and I want to talk about it. So
incredibly good. Yeah. I would love to do any of those.
All of those I think are like on the list of things we want to do one day for sure. But of those 4, The Wizard of Oz, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, adaptation, Rashomon, let us know which ones you're the most interested. Which one would you want to hear the most? I'll put a poll up. And whatever wins out will be our first project of 2023. It won't count as our quarterly. We'll still do it quarterly for patrons.
For the patrons.
Yeah, and that's more open. People can suggest whatever they want, whatever ends up getting voted. I don't want to like shoehorn in these choices, but this will be a separate thing. And I think it'd be a cool way to start the year. Any of those 4 is going to be like coming out the gate strong.
Start with a bang. Yeah. I mean, 2021 or 2022 here, we did Station 11. So it seems we kind of, unintentionally ended up with a banger.
I like to start the year with something strong. But anyway, let's get back to what we were talking about before. Looking forward to.
Yeah, let's go all the way back to Pinocchio. We talked about that in 2021 Last Looks. I have been dying to watch this movie. And Guillermo del Toro, we talked about him some with Cabinet of Curiosity, but I want to dig into him more. And at some point, I want to say this year, we will cover that. And it's getting incredible buzz. Everyone's loving it. It's in tons of people's lists of greatest movies of the year. So I'm very excited. And it's a story that I think we all know very well, but given the Guillermo del Toro style, I'd be excited.
So I need to do more research into it, but I think that it's being adapted off of a novel that is itself like an adaptation of the original Pinocchio story. Maybe.
I think so. The style, or maybe certain aspects of the plot.
So I need to do some more research into that so I can figure out exactly how to cover it.
Sure. What are you looking forward to? If you
Man, so many. There's so many. So some of these I don't know if they're going to come out this year, but they've been announced.
I have a big one that I want to say at the end because it's like sort of down the line. Who knows when it'll come out?
I might hit you with it.
Okay.
But first one I want to start off with is we've been talking about wanting to cover Dracula, and that's something that's been high on our list. And there's like the Bram Stoker, obviously an icon of horror. The other thing I was reading recently, there's a film called Nosferatu that Robert Eggers has been wanting to make. And remake. That original movie is a loose adaptation of Dracula.
Yeah. German expressionism icon Nosferatu.
So how fucking cool would it be to do like a run of 3 episodes where you cover the original book, you cover the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula film, and then you cover a Robert Eggers Nosferatu film, and then maybe like as a bonus episode for Patreon, you do the original expressionist, like old German expressionist film or something.
It'd be awesome. I think that's the way to get your hands dirty with some Dracula material for sure.
Maybe we could do that like in October. I just don't know if it'll be out. That's the only thing. We got to wait and see when it'll come out. But I would also we never talked about him, that filmmaker. So I would love to do that.
Dude, an Eggers Nosferatu would be so batshit crazy.
Right?
It would be insane.
Yeah, that would be really cool. And that's been confirmed with like Bill Skarsgård and stuff. It's like in that. Yeah. So
I saw that that's been announced. I just like I'm gonna be cautiously optimistic.
Apparently, it's been announced for years. He's been talking about making it for a long time. So we'll see. We'll see if it actually happens. One that is definitely happening though. Here's 2. White Noise, which is a book that is being adapted right now. It's coming out Friday on Netflix. It's an adaptation of a book by Don DeLillo, and he is a cult figure in writing that I've never read. This book I've never read, but the phrase "airborne toxic event" is from this book. So if you know the band, the Airborne Toxic Event, right? Isn't that the name of the band?
It sounds familiar. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Anyway, based off of this, so that phrase comes from this. It's a really cool, well-regarded book. Just came out. Has Adam Driver in it. Randomly, I don't even know if you've heard of this movie, but it's on Netflix now. And I think that's one we should try and cover in the coming year. Or if we can find time, I think it'd be really fun to do.
Yeah, totally. I would love to do that.
Okay, another one. Knock at the Cabin Door. Now, this is an adaptation of a book called The Cabin at the End of the World, I think. And it is by Paul Tremblay, who's an author that I really, really like, and I've been wanting.
Is Dave Bautista in this?
Dave Bautista. It's a Shyamalan movie. M. Night. It's getting buzz. It's coming out, I think, February, something like that. So that might be one we can cover as it's coming out.
I do think it's funny that we've ended up in a scenario where people underestimate M. Night Shyamalan. I understand that he maybe has had some things that people didn't really connect with. This, I mean, I'll be the first to admit that that Avatar: The Last Airbender movie was really, really unfortunate and upsetting. But he has had a few movies since that kind of make me understand that he's still there. He's still that same Shyamalan that
he's also. I think this is the first time he's adapting something. Curious to see if that affects the result, right? If maybe that'll rein him in a little bit if he's.
And I know you've mentioned Tremblay to me quite a few times.
I've never read this book, but I like him as an author for sure. So I'm excited for that one. We also had an announcement of a Neuromancer, William Gibson adaptation. Yeah. Who knows when that's coming? But again, on the horizon. Salem's Lot was supposed to come out this last year, but I think got delayed. So another Stephen King adaptation that I think is supposed to be coming out next year, high on the list. Now we're going to cover Stephen King, right? At some point we'll cover something from him. Could be Salem's Lot, could be Misery, could be Shawshank, could be Green Mile. There's a lot of, and there's so many others, right? That we could do, and we'll probably do more than one. Honestly, we usually do, but I think Salem's Lot is high on the list. My next one is Dune 2. I don't know if that's coming. Is that coming out this year? I forget.
Well, it finished principal photography, so I think it's supposed to come out in 2023, but I'm not 100% sure. But I also wouldn't be shocked if it got pushed to 2024.
Yeah. So if it comes out this year, we're gonna cover it. I think it's just going to be adapting the second half of the book, so we honestly don't even need to re-rate it or anything. We just
I think we'd find some way to jump back into Dune, like kind of how we did with It, though, right? We did something leading up to It Part 2, Chapter 2.
We covered the miniseries.
Well, we've already done the Dune David Lynch film, so we'll figure something out to lead into.
Even if we just jump into it, I'm excited. And then the other one, actually, that just reminded me that we're getting more Good Omens. And this new Good Omens, it's not an adaptation at this point. It's all new story. Maybe some of this stuff was talked about in the past between Neil and Terry Pratchett. But I'm excited to see that one, and I think it's something we could justify covering on the show too.
Yeah. Well, not to mention more Sandman, right?
Yeah, more Sandman. Although, is that coming out next year? Probably not.
No, just down the line. But I'm starting to set up some things that, because I feel like with Last Looks, we've looked forward to a lot of material for a long time. So let's have some in the episode that we're looking forward to, like down the line.
Yeah, all right. Now you go. I don't want to step on your toes.
Speaking of down the line, I talked about Sanderson earlier in the episode, and there's been announced, and there's rumblings that there'll be a Sanderson adaptation incoming.
Oh, okay. This isn't the one I was thinking of, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be animated. I don't know if it's going to be live action. He's like kind of tight-lipped about this so far, but it's very clear that he's meeting with production companies and starting to develop.
Are you talking about the one for Mistborn?
Yes, and I think it'll be for Mistborn. Now, there's also been things said about potential video games, but if he creates a Mistborn series and is, I think an author being heavily involved is important. Someone having a hand in it and trying to make sure it stays true to the source is important. It doesn't mean it's going to be a home run or anything incredible, but I would be really hopeful for a Mistborn. Like if we get it in the next few years, I would be really excited for a Mistborn series or film.
That reminds me, The Name of the Wind has been announced for years now. I haven't heard anything more yet.
I think they're worried with Name of the Wind that
Rothfuss.
Patrick Rothfuss hasn't turned in the third novel yet, so they're kind of waiting on that.
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't heard that confirmed. I think that's just speculation.
Well, Lin-Manuel Miranda was attached to the script, or he's attached to it in some way, and it's since backed off.
He was going to work on the music for it, I think, but I think he passed it off.
Okay.
I think he passed it off to somebody else. So somebody else is now officially doing it. So I assume they're working on it, but I haven't heard anything in a while. We're in that dead zone where like sometimes stuff goes silent, and then all of a sudden you get a trailer drop. And then also sometimes stuff goes silent and you never hear it again.
Yeah. I would really love for that to show back up because like I said, I've made it halfway through that first novel.
They paid a lot of money for that. I remember when it was announced, it was a bidding war and they paid Rothfuss a ton of money. So you would think they're going to do something with it.
I will say good for him.
Yeah. And then the other one, this is where I thought you were going to go.
Sure.
The Dark Tower was announced to be adapted by Flanagan.
God. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's obviously way down the line. It was just announced. But yeah.
He just got the rights. He basically announced online that he got the rights. And that's all we know so far.
Yeah. Very
He's
excited
developing
about that.
scripts, I believe.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people listening might be like expecting us to talk about that one because that was a big thing online when that was announced. Everybody was celebrating because I think a lot of people see him as
Stephen King's been so important to this podcast, and then we like a lot of Flanagan stuff. Like I watched Black Mass. I've watched Midnight Club. Like we watched Dr. Sleep for the podcast, which was an actual
Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah. So I'm excited about Mike Flanagan having his hands on it. I think people are pretty bummed about Midnight Club.
Midnight Mass, is that the name of the other one?
Yeah, Midnight Mass was solid. It was
That's
good.
one I hear a lot of people really liked, actually. Like a lot of people were saying it was like his best thing he's done.
Oh, I wouldn't put it over Hill House, but yeah, it's definitely very good. I enjoyed myself.
Interesting.
But I can't imagine. I've been waiting for Dark Tower, right? Like I wanted to read Dark Tower in general.
And he says this is his dream. This is the thing he's been wanting to do for his entire life.
So if he can deliver on like the Denis Villeneuve dreaming to create a Dune, like that is my wish for the future. Like if this is fantastic, like that would.
He's a great follow on TikTok, by the way. He's a lot of fun. So I'm rooting for him.
Very transparent as a filmmaker and an artist. Yeah. Like I find that refreshing. I think it's really cool when people allow you in like that.
Okay, man. So here we are at the end of the episode. It's time to set some resolutions, some goals for 2023. We talked about this last year. We did some of them I followed through, some of them I maybe let slip. But I think it's good to do. I'm in this mood right now. I get excited. I get energized for the new year. And I start going like, these are the things I'm going to do. And I start laying it out. And, it doesn't always come true, but I don't regret doing it because I think sometimes it launches me in the right direction. So make sure I got my head on straight in the new year. You want to start? You got anything?
Sure, yeah. I've talked in the past, like, I don't love the idea of resolutions because I'd rather just make goals and sort of get there on my own. The resolution thing starts to feel kind of...
I'm very loose with that term because, like, I agree. Goals. You set a goal and then you start to reverse engineer. You start to, like, walk back and say, what do I need to do to hit certain goals? Okay, well, that starts to give me a blueprint for, like, where I should be traveling.
This year, I'd like to create something, like, as a director of photography or a director, I'd like to create something that was wholly my own vision.
Ooh.
So that's something I want to do, and like, I'm striving to do. And again, this is it's an industry that's not it's very expensive to get things created, right. And like, that's something that I will forever be pursuing this. So like, if I hit it this year or not, it's a goal that I have. So there's that goal, and then also just like personally on like we've talked in the past about like bettering ourselves, and I've been trying recently. We talked last year. I was just listening to our 2021. I wanted to work out more. I've been working out more, and I've been running a lot. So I want to try to run a half marathon this year. That's a goal of mine.
Wow.
Everything holds up and I don't get injured, I will run a half marathon this year. So that's something I'm looking forward to. And then for the podcast, I will again say more video content. I'd like to see this podcast develop more into video content.
We didn't really do that. I will say we introduced these shorts. We did a few shorts that actually took off and did pretty well. And yeah. I would love to do some more of those. Editing them is tricky. That's my main thing that's limiting me, is it takes me so long because every step of it I have to learn, because I can't remember it when I go to do it again, and I have to relearn everything. And like how to splice in like movie clips, and like all of that is so slow that it takes me like hours to create a fucking 45-second short. And I'm like, this is way too long. It shouldn't take this long.
Editing is a monster. And like I started in post-production, and I realized very quickly that like I'm good at it. I have a temperament for it, but I that's not my passion. So like I can do it, but it's also like, I mean, I do it for the podcast all the time, and I've gotten to a system for the podcast that makes it manageable. But even so, like trying to put together videos, I have so much respect for people who put together like solid edits on YouTube or wherever, TikTok.
Video podcasting is like a big thing right now, and like honestly, if we were like truly
if you see a large scale podcast that has video, they probably hire someone to edit. You know, it's a difficult task.
Probably. That's the thing. Yeah, that's the thing, that we're not big enough to afford to pay an editor. That is the thing. We'd have to do it ourselves.
Think of like the McElroys. For a long time, I think Griffin was editing them. Is he still?
I don't think so. I think they have an editor now.
And that's so much of your life, so much of your time. Like I don't have the time, unfortunately, pursuing other industry pursuits.
Yeah, but that's not to say that some sort of video content is not something we could try and continue to experiment with. And that's something that I'm definitely into. So for me, I talk a lot about this, so I won't rehash it in my Query Quest episode we have on Patreon, but I want to, the number I'm setting myself is that unless I sign with an agent, I want to have queried by the end of the year 50 agents. I think that's my number.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
So what's your process for that?
So my process is I'm going to send out a batch, and my batch is going to be between 5 and 10 to start out. And then you wait, right? And you see if you get requests and stuff. But then like over time, you can't wait forever. So you start setting regular intervals where you start sending out another batch. Yeah. And you just got to keep track of it.
Once a month or so? Or
maybe.
More?
You got to keep track of it. You start knocking people off as you get no's. You start... you have to be comfortable with how many you have out at the same time. 50 might be more than I can get to, but that's my, like, if I don't sign with somebody, if I can say that I at least tried 50 times, then I'll feel like I gave it its all. And that's the thing. I want to give it its all this year. I want to give this book its best chance. Maybe I don't sign this year. Maybe I sign much before 50. I don't know. It's one of the exciting things. I don't know how it's going to go. Beyond that, I want to write new stuff because I have been limiting, like I have not been allowing myself to write outside of this book for months. I've been like buckled down. This is the only thing I'm allowed to work on.
Has it been this whole year basically?
Not the whole year. I did some stuff early on, some other short fiction and stuff, but even then it wasn't a lot. It was just like a little bit here or there. I want to actually like generate some new short fiction. I want to start a new novel. There's NaNoWriMo. I've never done like a fresh NaNoWriMo where you start a whole new book. I was thinking next year, maybe I'll try that. I'm going to Rainforest Writers Retreat in March again. This will be the first time I've ever gone. This is, I think, my third or fourth year going now. Maybe my fourth year going. this will be the first time I haven't been working on my underwater novel. Like, I've always been working on that when I'm there. And so I'm excited to go to that and be working on something completely new. Lots of stuff like that. So writing-wise, I'm so excited for this year. I think it's going to be a fun year. I'm going to hopefully generate a lot of new stuff, and excited to see what happens with it. Talking about fitness stuff, and this is like somewhat related, but I got this new leg brace because I am disabled and I have a bum leg, essentially a bad ankle. And this brace has been pretty huge. It's allowing me to walk a lot farther with a lot less pain, a lot faster.
I haven't heard it. I remember when you got it, I haven't heard an update since, so I'm happy to hear that it's working out for you.
It's working great, but the problem is it's been shitty weather here. It's been rainy, it's been snowy, it's been icy. It's like, you don't want to go out in this. It's dark. Like, it's already dark right now. It's like 4:30. Like, I'm looking out the window, it's already dark. Like, it's just not great. But like, as the year goes on, the weather gets really great here, and like, I want to walk more. I want to be out and be about and like be healthier. I'm not tying that to any sort of like weight loss or anything, but I want to just be healthier and use this brace and be more mobile. So that's one of my goals, I guess, is to do that in the new year.
Yeah, I love that.
And podcast related, this is something we talked about last time and we still haven't hit it. So I'm going to reiterate, this is an ongoing goal, but I would love to get 1,000 subs on YouTube so that we can monetize. It's just it would be a really cool milestone. So if you're not subscribed yet to our YouTube channel, please do it. That would be awesome. We're over 500. We're on our way, but we're not there. And then 100 ratings on Apple. We're very close to that. We're inching closer, but that's been like triple digits. It's something I've just been waiting for, especially in the US. Like, I would love to get there. So if you haven't rated us on Apple yet, please consider doing so. And I guess that's a good way to transition to the end of the episode. This is going to be it for 2022. We're putting a wrap on it. Thank you all for coming with us along the way, whether you listen to just this episode or you've listened to every single one all year. We thank you for being here with us.
Right. And please help and continue to support our Patreon, patreon.com/ink2film. We put out bonus episodes monthly, and we also try to, interact with some of our patrons on Discord through that. So that's always been a fun avenue. I think it's like more intimate. We have a specific tab for just patrons.
Yeah.
So
we have 4 quarterly projects we do every year. I did not write down what they were. I could try and think of it off the top of my head, but I probably get them wrong. I know we did, I think Emma might have been one. Fight Club, most recent. Stand By Me. 2001 Space Odyssey might have been
I think
quarterly.
So,
yeah. I think those were the 4. So we every few months we put out a poll to our patrons. Only patrons can vote on it. And you can also suggest, only patrons can suggest on this big thread. We have a thread that goes all year. You can comment on there, and then you just like the posts that you agree with most. And then we take those and we come up with the polls, and we get 4 projects every year. So support us on Patreon if you'd be interested in participating in that. We'd love to have you.
Also, make sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All of those at ink2film. Twitter is currently still available at the end of 2022. Here, we'll see how that goes. But
yeah, I think it's gonna survive. I just don't know how much we're gonna want to be active on it.
But we're also on TikTok. We're on basically every social media platform. And if you have one that you prefer, let us know, and we can jump on there as well.
I'm on Mastodon now.
Yeah,
I'm still getting my bearings on there. It's kind of an odd one, but I'm still figuring it out.
We do have that Discord too, which I love Discord. So
let us know if you want to get on our Discord channel, and I will send you an invite. All right, and that's going to be it for 2022. It's been a great year. Cheers. Raise a glass to you, whether you're drinking alcohol or just your beverage of choice. On to 2023. Until next year,
keep adapting.